It's good to see the ball go through the net. But I think, every game, regardless, you're making shots, you're not, it feels really, really good to have your team.
After Lexie Hull revealed something that is completely upending our preconceived notions about Caitlin Clark, the basketball community is in shock. Unexpectedly, Hull revealed startling information that provided fresh insight into Clark's character, life story, and the true workings of the Indiana Fever. Social media is in disarray, teammates are talking, and fans are in disbelief. What was it that Lexie disclosed? And why is it permanently altering Caitlin's reputation? Every explosive information that emerges from the ashes is revealed now. Lexie Hull was a well-known name prior to the skepticism and the battle to maintain her profession. A fearless competitor who battled her way to a national championship title, she had previously stood tall at Stanford. Every court she walked on exuded confidence, keen focus, and unrivaled determination. It was more than just potential that led the Indiana Fever to select her as the 6th overall pick in the WNBA draft. It has to do with belief. They saw a player with quick thinking, deft movement, and transformational leadership skills. However, the professional arena is a very different battleground. The WNBA's power, speed, and unrelenting pressure weren't just physical obstacles. They were psychological ones. Hull found herself sitting on the bench more than she had ever done before. The minutes passed by game after game, and her confidence vanished along with them. The applause she used to elicit turned into echoes. She subsequently admitted, "It messes with your head," explaining what it was like to become simply another name on the roster after being an essential component of a winning jigsaw. She wasn't the only one who felt that way. All of the league's players had formerly been stars. Every teammate and opponent was once the top player on their college squad. They were all now racing to become noticeable and important once more. However, Hull's hardship was only a small portion of a larger issue that had been simmering inside the Indiana Fever long before she showed up. It wasn't simply games the squad was losing. They were becoming disillusioned. Their identity has gradually changed as a result of years of failure. The locker room was laden with silent resignation as losing grew commonplace, even expected. No amount of new talent could cover for the lack of a genuine winning culture or accountability. It was more than just missing shots inside those barriers. It has to do with a lack of purpose. With every passing season, encouragement gave way to criticism, and the prospect of making things better diminished. Then Caitlin Clark came into the picture, almost like a storm building on the horizon. She wasn't a typical addition to the team. It was a change in energy. She entered with a heaviness that attracted attention from all sides. Fans packed venues, cameras trailed her, and anticipation surged like tsunamis. However, Clark didn't care about celebrity or ticket sales. It was intimate. The Fever's locker room was filled with the same ferocious passion that had made her a legend at Iowa. She wasn't there to fit in with the team's culture. To revise it, she was present. The team's losing mindset wasn't the only thing she challenged with her high standards of performance. It proclaimed war on it. The transformation was evident from the very beginning. Practices sharpened. With something new, accountability, conversations are louder and the atmosphere is electrifying. Hull saw it in her presence as much as in Clark's play. Caitlin had an intensity that demanded respect both on and off the court. Hull would later remark, "It's really awesome to get to know her," realizing that Clark was thoughtful, grounded, and unexpectedly mature for someone with so much responsibility. However, her calmness was accompanied with an unwavering assumption that everyone in her vicinity would share her enthusiasm. Insiders claim that one of their early practices together was the pivotal moment. Frustration exploded after a series of reckless turnovers. Known for her sharpness, Clark abruptly stopped the practice. It was not a motivational speech that came next, it was a linguistic frenzy. Her tone was clear and unvarnished as she called out a number of veterans. The tension in the gym was so intense that it became silent. The media's favorite smiling rookie was not this. This was the version that was shaped by rivalry. Her remarks struck a deep chord, revealing the weaknesses in a group that had always shied away from conflict. The coaching staff was in a difficult situation. This was their highly valued rookie, their path to prominence, publicly questioning the team's leadership. She has a strong but risky drive. There were rumors that she should be restrained and asked to calm down in order to lessen the unease she had caused. However, they all understood in their hearts that there was no destruction taking place. It was a change. They made the dangerous decision to let her fire burn. No interference, no repression. It was merely a silent wager that her intensity could do what years of tactics and acquisitions hadn't forced the Fever to wake up. Some athletes shied away from Clark's combative approach, but Lexie Hull saw something quite different. Keep your distance because the events that follow will completely upend your preconceived notions about these emerging legends. The inner spark. How Caitlin Clark woke up the lack of faith in Lexie Hull. Lexie Hull realized that this was her final opportunity during that anxious moment when everything seemed to be on the line. This was more than just another practice or game. It was the turning point in her life. She chose to rise to meet Caitlin Clark's demanding energy rather than back down. Hull saw Clark's fire as a challenge and an opportunity to recapture the aspect of herself that had flourished under pressure, while other players perceived it as overwhelming. After practice, she started to remain behind, running extra drills, perspiring from effort, and overcoming the silent misgivings that had previously held her back. Hull stayed with Clark when she stayed late. Two distinct flames burning toward the same goal, they matched each other's intensity. Before long, something amazing began to take place. The two started developing a synergy that electrified the court as the spark that had been absent from Hull's game started to reappear. Hull's renewed bustle was greeted with astounding precision by Clark's amazing court vision. Hull would somehow be there, catching them in stride and finishing hard at the rim as Clark would sling passes through inconceivable spaces and angles that defied sense. Tension gave way to trust. The speed at which their relationship developed astounded coaches and teammates. Their bond was created via conflict, perspiration, anger, and a shared unwillingness to give up rather than comfort. Hull would later claim that Caitlin altered everything, and she meant it. There was more to Clark's presence than just stats and highlights. It was about enthusiasm, faith, and an almost infectious will to uplift everyone in her vicinity. Hull's rebirth became a symbol. Anyone could overcome self-doubt if she could. Soon after, the Fever spread to the remainder of Indiana. With the confidence that Clark would find her for the part, Aaliyah Boston began setting more difficult screens. Once apprehensive, Kelsey Mitchell started running the court as if every possession was important. Knowing that nothing was overlooked by Clark's eyes. The excitement that now permeated every game gave even the bench players a fresh lease on life, motivating them to battle harder in practice. The offensive strategy of the Fever changed. No longer steady, no longer predictable. They played with a sense of purpose, hunger, and synchronization that could only result from a common belief. However, excellence always has a price. The pressure increased along with the Fever's success. Once a far-off curiosity, the media glare suddenly burnt like a merciless sun. Hull, who had previously blended into the background, was suddenly subject to a different type of scrutiny. On the internet, every error, missed opportunity, every defensive slip-up was highlighted, examined, and criticized. Analysts and fans discussed every move she made, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the person behind the jersey was still learning how to manage the spotlight. Hull refused to allow the loud cacophony break her once more. She started using that pressure as fuel, turning it into a silent power. She acknowledged that it was difficult to keep up with Clark's speed in a rare interview. It was the most difficult thing she had ever done. It transforms your entire life, she added. Every day turned into an endurance test. Long evenings spent watching films rather than sleeping, early mornings in the gym before dawn, and never-ending mental struggles against exhaustion and self-doubt. She discovered that greatness is not glamorous. It's isolating. Most people will never see the sacrifices it requires. But despite everything, she developed an unbreakable resilience. She was no longer seeking acceptance by striving for perfection. She was pursuing it for herself. But success creates jealousy as much as admiration. Rivals started to dislike the Fever's rise throughout the league. What had begun as respect for Clark's skill evolved into animosity. Opponents used every chance to rough her up, testing her limitations with cheap shots and hard fouls. You attempt to break her spirit if you are unable to halt her game. The Fever, however, would not have it. Hull, who is now one of the team's emotional pillars, steadfastly supported her friend. Hull didn't think twice when Clark was heavily fouled during a tense game against a rival veteran. In a matter of seconds, she was facing the aggressor, her voice piercing the confusion. Tempers erupted, and the benches almost cleared, but Hull's message was crystal clear. An assault on Caitlin was an assault on all of them. That intense altercation turned into a pivotal event. The Fever were no longer a struggling group trying to figure out who they were. Battle-tested and passionately protective of one another, they were a cohesive force. The team had discovered something more profound than triumph, thanks to Clark's relentless perseverance and Hull's rekindled passion. Through their common fight, they had discovered loyalty, camaraderie, and an unbreakable relationship. Caitlin Clark's remarks did not hold the real key to her leadership. It was with her. Slogans and speeches were not necessary for her. Her passion was more powerful than any motivational speech. After a missed rotation, she glared sharply. Her passes were so precise that they required preparation. The unspoken belief that each player would give it their all. These turned into her world's unwritten regulations. Clark didn't attract followers. She created fighters. It was more than just a comeback for Hull. It was a rebirth. The harsh reality of professional basketball had resurrected the grit that once characterized her at Stanford. She was no longer only getting by in the league. In one of the most competitive settings possible, she was flourishing. But this was just the start of their tale. Because what followed would put their friendship as well as their skill to the test. When celebrity attempted to destroy trust, how did it endure? You might be surprised by the answer, so pay close attention. When family and fame collide, the Indiana Fever evolved from being a team that many people ignored to being at the forefront of every sports discussion when Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA spotlight. The tickets disappeared in a matter of hours. Every step they made was captured on camera, and social media was constantly discussing them. Nothing escaped the public's notice, not even a performance, remark, or facial expression. That kind of strain could easily shatter the basis for most teams. They might have been divided by jealousy, ego, and attention-seeking rivalry. However, Lexie Hull witnessed an unexpected development. Lexie saw the change in energy from the first practice. Along with talent, Caitlin's entrance brought a tsunami of interest that could have completely engulfed the team. However, the Fever used the attention to unite themselves rather than let it separate them. Players like Hull, who had already battled through the league's harsh ups and downs, understood that togetherness was the only path forward and that jealousy was the easy way. "We could feel how much she changed the environment," Hull once said in a low voice. "However, we learned to ride it rather than battle it." The Fever were more than simply teammates behind the scenes. They were developing a relationship outside of the courtroom. The things that kept them together were quiet chats in empty gyms, interminable bus rides full of laughing, and shared dinners after late games. Clark didn't receive celebrity treatment. They treated her like one of them. While the rookies looked up to her without losing sight of their own roles, the veterans made sure she never felt alone. Something potent emerged from that careful balancing act between equality and admiration. The relationship between Clark and Hull developed into one of the most subtly captivating tales in women's basketball as the season progressed. Clark's instincts became second nature to Hull. Caitlin's movements, passes, and plays required faith, and Lexie reacted with accuracy. They flowed like a single heartbeat as they played more. Beneath that flow, however, was unceasing effort, unending communication, and a common goal to demonstrate that they were more than just Caitlin's squad. The storm that put everything to the test then arrived. The day Caitlin's injuries drove her off the court. The rhythm abruptly stopped. The once powerful offense faltered. The lanes were packed with opponents who dared the Fever to operate without their star. And uncertainty began to creep in for the first time. It seemed like a fresh start. Later, Hull acknowledged without the player who had become their pillar of support, the team felt disoriented and unsure of how to go. Confidence faltered, games dragged, and the once warm spotlight burnt too brightly. However, this was the turning point that distinguished robust teams from weak ones. Hull came forward as the voice the locker room needed, determined not to let the momentum wane. She reminded everyone that the renown of a single player wasn't the foundation of the Fever's power. Collective willpower served as its foundation. Communication improved, and practices became more intense. In an effort to demonstrate that the Fever was more than simply the Caitlin Clark act, every player started exerting extra effort. They discovered something surprising in the absence of their star. They discovered fresh strategies for victory. The ball accelerated. Rolls.